Killeen, and thank you for watching this special election interview on HOMTV. On Tuesday, May 7th, voters in the Okemos Public School District will be asked to vote yes or no on the Okemos bonding proposal appearing on the ballot. Joining us now for the interview about the proposal is Okemos Public Schools Superintendent John Hood. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
He's going to explain what this proposal means for the school district and voters. Thank you so much for joining me. And my first question is, you talked a little bit about you've been with Okemos for a while now. Can you tell us a little bit about your background working in the Okemos School District?
Absolutely. So I've had the privilege of working with the Okemos schools since I was an intern teacher during my 5th year at Michigan State University. I was fortunate enough to be placed at Chippewa Middle School under the leadership of Dr. Tom Twitty at the time, and knew right away that this was a place that I wanted to spend my educational career, because the community was so intertwined with the schools and just so supportive of supporting the educational mission to meet the needs of all kids, which also meant supporting teachers and what teachers need to be successful. So instead of leaving after my internship year and going back to New York, where I'm from, I knew I wanted to stay in Okemos. Fortunate enough to have been hired as then a teacher at the middle school, and spent about 5 years being the 6th and 7th grade teacher and directing some musicals there. Also fortunate enough at that time to be elected as the Teachers Union president, and learn a lot about leadership and organizational systems through that. And then after that, I shifted to a larger classroom, being elementary school principal at Edgewood Elementary School for a few years, until that school closed because of the recession. And then principal at Wardcliffe Elementary School for about 5 years. Wonderful community, great experience there. And then returned to my roots at Chippewa Middle School, where I was the intern and the teacher as the principal after that. Wow. For about 3 years.
Come back full circle.
Come back full circle. And the district still fighting through recessions and kind of becoming lean, then restructured the district. And Chippewa went away from being a 6-7-8 school to a 7-8 school. And our other middle school, Kenowa, which was a 6-7-8 school, went to be a 5-6 school. So I became the 5-6 principal at Kenowa. We developed a great new program for our students and staff there. I spent 6 years as the principal there, and then transitioned to central office. Got another bigger classroom to be our assistant superintendent for instruction, which I've done for the last 2.5 years. And then so fortunate and honored to be the superintendent, have the board appoint me as superintendent after the interview process this January. So kind of fresh at the job, but not new to Okemos.
Okay, yeah, so you seem to be the perfect person to ask what this ballot language means and what the proposal is really asking of voters.
So the proposal is asking our voters to consider allowing us to borrow $24.9 million that we would pay back over the course of about 6 years to fund high priority needs across the district. And those high priority needs were identified through committees. In Okemos, we try to be very transparent and very collaborative in terms of when we make these decisions, not making them in a vacuum. So we had parents, community members, staff, administration on committees the last 2 years, really doing an assessment of our district and what are our needs. And the committees came up with kind of level 1, level 2, and level 3 needs. Level 1 being ones committee members felt were at their core. Like these are, if there's any needs to meet the level 1s first. And then level 2, if you can meet those, it'd also be nice to have these. And then level 3, more so to, hey,
look at these.
Yeah, more so a little more to the dreaming portion. And our superintendent made a recommendation to the board, which the board appreciated, was to only move forward the level 1s, kind of the must-haves. So that's what's in this $24.9 million proposal. And there are a lot of things in it. Transportation, security, technology, facilities updates, some capital outlay updates, expanding one of our elementary schools. So there's really something in this for everyone, multiple things in this for everyone.
Okay, yeah, you touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us some of the specific projects that the 24.9 will fund?
Yeah, so one of the project is replacement of technology. Our voters, so thankful in 2013 they passed our last bond to fund some technology and transportation upgrades. In 2013, those monies have been spent. We've had those computers now at the secondary level for 6 years, and they're wearing out. We can't even get parts for them. So as you know, if you own a phone or if you own a computer, that the shelf life for those things is pretty limited. So we need to replace some of those tools to get into our students' hands, as well as the infrastructure behind those tools to make sure we can connect and have good connection, good speeds, and good security. And other classroom technology like smart boards, projectors, audio amplification systems, even our teacher devices. So the technology portion of the bond is significant, but most of the technology portion, about 2/3, is directly related to classroom instruction for students. In addition, there's an expansion we're proposing to Bennett Woods Elementary School. Our district has closed schools over the past 10 to 15 years, and we're seeing our population start to rebound. We're up about 550 students from our low, and we're actually larger than we've ever been. But as we look at our current structures, we don't really need a whole school, because with a whole school, you have to bring along with that additional administrative staffing, secretarial staffing, custodial staffing, food service staffing, that it really is money we don't need to spend quite yet. And our elementaries are where the capacity issues currently exist. Our secondary schools still have room in them. So one of the fixes we'd like our community to look at for our immediate capacity needs is to add 4 rooms onto Bennett Woods, 4 classrooms and 1 specials room.
Okay.
Other things that are in are replacing school buses, security upgrades and enhancements, air conditioning, adding air conditioning to our schools. We have some schools with, some schools without, kind of to get rid of that inequity.
Would this put air conditioning in all schools now?
It would.
Okay.
Yeah, and when we say all schools, we'll put it in all our schools that are currently open, and Edgewood, which is been repurposed as our early childhood center, community ed center. So Edgewood would also get that.
And that, you touched on the 4 rooms being added on. How long is the expectation that that's going to fill the capacity needs? Yeah, so that's something the board has charged administration with continuing to monitor. Okemos is fortunate to be one of the few school districts around that actually is experiencing student growth. And student growth is critical to a school system because our funding comes based on a per pupil allocation. So Okemos gets $8,409 per student. So the more students we get, the more stipends we get to help meet needs and run our system. So we have about a $51.7 million budget overall, and we've had new neighborhoods being built, and we've also had some of our older neighborhoods, seniors turning over those homes now. So very, very fortunate. If that growth continues, we may have to look at other options, and the board has charged us with doing that. Looking at repurposing Edgewood, maybe opening Wardcliff, maybe adding on to existing buildings, maybe building on a property. All of those are going to be looked at. Should we still continue? Should we fill those 4 classrooms and still have need? The last thing we want to do is ask our taxpayers to build or renovate or reopen a school that's not needed, and not be good stewards of their money. Okay, so then talking about making the most of taxpayers' money, why was bonding the money the best option? So districts are very limited with ways we can obtain more funds than that per pupil allowance. We can go for bond proposals to our community or a sinking fund. So, and we're fortunate in Okemos to have taxpayers that have supported both. We currently levy about 7 mills. We currently do levy 7 mills for our debt levy. And debt levy is kind of like a mortgage. That's the bond. But we also levy around a mill for a building and site sinking fund, which is another avenue districts can take. But they're restricted in what they can be used for. We can't pay for staffing.
out of these, can't pay for textbooks out of these. There's some pretty clear legislative rules to what can be funded out of those two pots. But with a $51 million budget, 85% of which is staffing costs, it leaves 15% to do all the other things you need to do to run a district, including supplies, textbooks, paying the bills for lights, replacing carpet, furnaces, roofs, all the wear and tear that buildings go through is only, including running the educational program that's not staffing, is 15% of our budget. So bonding is a way to go where districts can borrow money, where communities weigh that and support it, that help us not have to impact the educational programming for students. That general fund stays focused on the educational program and teachers.
Yes, you can focus on education while also making the upgrades you want.
Yeah.
So what are the taxpayers getting for their investment? You talked a little bit about the projects, but what kind of returns can they expect?
Taxpayers that don't have students in our schools have supported our bonds in the past for the reason of a strong school system is really good for property values, and it's great for our community and our community's values as well. Our local realtors have told us in the past that there's a 15% premium on property values for an outstanding school district, of which Okemos is one. So certainly the strength of our schools is intertwined in property values, but our community has also shown support for good public education in the past, and they want our students to get the best education they can and to be able to get a 21st century learning education, one that's going to help them be successful in whatever they choose to do in the future. So if you have students in Okemos, certainly you're going to see an impact on instruction, not just through technology, which is a tool of instruction, but we're also looking at buying and hopefully replacing some furniture that's decades old. We haven't had money to replace furniture in a systematic way. That's not replacing every piece of furniture. We're going to repurpose. But we have flexible learning environments we're going to try to put into play, which really are, when I went to school, you had a desk. It was a molded desk with a chair on the back, and you could kind of move the desks around, but it didn't flow, and it was meant more for a lecture type of instruction. Well, we know a lot about learning and what's retained during instruction and what's lecture and what's not, and then to create an environment where kids can have dialogue, where they can create together, where they can reteach each other, where there can be small group instruction going on, where the environment of the building can be changed to meet the instructional needs or the needs of individual students, we think is going to have a really positive impact on their learning. So that's in the bond as well. Certainly that equity piece we talked about with air conditioning. Some kids have it, some kids don't. On those hot days, our kids having a quality of the educational environment or equity in the educational environment. And being able to monitor that, we think will help have some positive outcomes for students in their learning as well. And then security. Parents send us to the kids with their most precious resource, kids. Send kids to school, and they trust us to keep them safe, and that's a huge responsibility of schools. And we know, and we've all heard on the news, awful things that have been happening in school systems or in communities in terms of violence. So making sure we have the security measures that are in place to make sure that we can keep our kids safe when they're at school. So that's a part of this as well.
The 2013 bond covered a lot of that security and technology that you've been talking about. What are some of the changes and improvements that we've seen from 2013 to now?
So since 2013 to now, in terms of security, Okemos has electronic locks on a majority of our locks, our doors. We have cameras in our hallways. We have a radio system where we can talk to each other as administrators through a repeater, so we don't have to rely on cell phones. We also have a way to talk directly to first responders who might be responding to a crisis at the school. Most likely it's a crisis where a student's been hurt. So we can talk to the fire department or the ambulance or the police officer that's responding and bring them right to the location where we are and start communicating to them what the needs are before they even arrive on site, so we can get kids great care and staff great care, or community members great care. Those have been changes that have all been in place since 2013, and we want to take the next step. And we've identified, we're doing and have done building assessments with Meridian Township Police to look at where are some gaps still. Mm-hmm. So there's doors that we need more locks, more cameras. That police notification system is end of life, so we need to upgrade that, upgrade our radios. We'd like to install some 3M barrier film on our windows, mm-hmm. Which help inhibit projectiles or people breaking through windows into rooms or into buildings. So taking some nice measures to, again, make sure we have a safe and orderly learning environment, because if you don't have safety, kids aren't going to be available for learning. Yeah,
definitely a top priority. And that 5 to 6 year time frame, can we expect that every 5 or 6 years a new education or a new safety and technology bond being proposed, just to keep improving on that?
Yeah, so certainly sustainability is a issue that many districts face, not just Okemos. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon for taxpayers to see every 5 or 6 years a ballot initiative like this, mm-hmm. Because again, we're so limited with our budgets and have very few other ways we can fund our schools. So I can't predict for our taxpayers, will that occur again? That's something that the Board of Education helps direct me to do as the superintendent. I wouldn't want to speak for the board in that case, but mm-hmm. I can tell you we have had bonds in 2007, 2013, and now this year.
So yeah, that 6-year pattern.
Yeah.
And you talked about how property values are tied into school funding.
Yeah.
And the 2008 recession, one of the big things hit was property values. So if the economy experienced another recession, will these debts restrict future projects that you're working on?
So when Proposal A passed, it moved to a per pupil funding, mm-hmm. which moved a bit away from property values funding the schools. Our budget would be actually much larger than it currently is right now if that hadn't happened, mm-hmm. but it did, and to provide equity to schools, and we understand why. Yeah. In terms of the bond, so we levy mills. 7 mills is currently levied for our debt levy for our taxpayers, and we're continuing. We're proposing maintaining that for an extra 3 years or so. And if a recession were to occur, that mill is based on the assessed value of taxable value of a house. Mm-hmm. So when we say this 7 mill rate isn't going to cost you more or isn't going to cost you less, what we're saying is that 7 mill rate isn't going to change. If your property values go up, then that 7 mills generates a little bit more money. Mm-hmm. If your property values go down, it generates less money for the district. So we know the ebb and flow to that, and our taxpayers are very used to that. That's how it's been for them for years. But that's how it would impact the mill, what the millage generates.
Yeah, and there was a consultant that came to the township board meeting that was talking about it. They were doing very conservative estimates mm-hmm. To kind of cushion that in case if the property values did decrease.
Exactly.
And so why is right now the right time to be making this investment?
We have those critical needs that those committees identified. In terms of the technology, replacing our secondary devices alone, I think we estimated just getting new devices into the hands of our high school would be like $1.3 or $1.4 million just to do that. Well, in a $51 million budget, $52 million budget doesn't allow a lot of money to do that and support those other things we talked about earlier.
And the technology that you're touching on, what are some of these new devices you guys are getting, and how are they going to be used to better teach kids?
Sure. So, and technology is one portion. I know you asked that question. There's more as to the now, but since you followed up with technology, so again, in Okemos, we use a committee of our stakeholders to decide what should the device be. So Sherry Meyer, Assistant Superintendent, and Aaron Chapman, our Technology Director, pulled together committees of 5, 6, 7, 8 teachers, staff, and 9, 12 teachers and staff, and teachers from different departments, because the language arts teacher might want something different in a device than the science or math teacher. Mm-hmm. We looked at also non-classroom teachers, instructional staff, what might they want, and try to get a really round view of different needs that kids might have in different classes, whether it's an elective class, whether it's a music class, or whether it's a core academic class or a language class. And then we create a list of like must-haves. And then we looked at devices, what devices meet these criteria, and really, and what devices have a good warranty, because we know students are using these. They're going to be wear and tear, and are going to last with battery life and warranty and repair rates. So we've checked references, and we're getting them in the hands of our students to try out. So the student voice is certainly something we value also in Okemos. It's not just the adults solving the problems for the students and getting input, but then what do the kids think about it? And we heard feedback from the students and teachers about, like, we have a bag that the kids put the devices in to protect them. And it's a bag with a strap. Well, the high school kids don't want to wear a bag with a strap. They already have their backpack.
Yeah.
So we're evolving our practices. We've learned since last time, heard their voice. Now they're going to get more of a protective sleeve to put it in that can fit in a backpack.
Okay.
So, we've really trusted the process to help lead us, and are very intentional about getting all the stakeholders to communicate with us. So when we do invest this money that our community has afforded us in the past, that we're being really intentional and really responsible stewards of that money.
And I know, there are some parents who are worried that their kid might be getting a computer too early or something. How do you make that decision with what devices kids are allowed at different ages? So
certainly that's a concern, screen time. It's a concern at home as me as a parent too. How much screen time is my kid getting? Not just at school, but then they come home and are watching, TV or playing Fortnite or whatever. Or maybe I'm dating, Fortnite might not be in anymore, but it is in my house. So our teachers are aware of that and very intentional about using technology as a tool for learning, but not all learning has to occur through technology. We know it helps give kids those 21st century skills. We know it can help them access information that's out of the bounds of the library of the school. The library used to house all the information in the school, and you went to the library to get it all. Well, we still do that, but now we know we can access information from anywhere. We can create, we can connect, we can seek out experts that might be out of our walls. The technology is a wonderful tool that can really promote some higher order thinking, higher order creativity between students, where they're creating, where they're solving real world problems, even as littles, but our teachers are very cognizant as to how, when, does it meet the needs of the lesson, and not always using that as the tool. Now we know there's value in paper pencil. There's value in having a book in front of you, value in highlighting, value in that writing that happens. And it's great to have the tool, and it's one of the many tools in our toolbox, and one we do rely on, but that our teachers have a really good age-appropriate view of.
Now, switching back over to security again, has that become a big enough part of the budget where either state or federal government needs to step in and kind of take some of that funding? If you're doing it every 6 years and it's only becoming more and more of a budgetary need, is that something that needs to happen, or some funding changes?
Well, funding changes in education are a common theme that you probably are aware of, and that are certainly talked about in policy at the legislative letter of the governor's proposal, and certainly not only just funding security, but just make our schools fund it. Do we have enough funding to even run our programming? So we run a pretty lean program here, and certainly security needs are probably more at the forefront now than ever. And you can see it in our bond proposal, over $500,000 of security needs in here. We apply for another avenue that we've tried to obtain security funding through is applying for grants, but those are often competitive grants. And Okemos is well positioned because of past bond issues, and us also dipping into that general fund that we have to fulfill some needs where we've seen them. So we've, like this winter, we applied for a grant at our high school and weren't fortunate enough we didn't receive it. I can tell you our security is pretty state of the art here in Okemos. Our Meridian Township Police have worked closely with us. They're in our buildings when we do lockdowns, and we have some nice security measures that aren't readily seen by the public, nor should they be seen by the public. That give me great confidence in our ability to keep kids safe. But again, in Okemos, we've never arrived. We're always going to be reassessing how can we do better.
Yep.
And certainly it would welcome systematic funding that allowed us to do that. But that goes well beyond the security conversation.
Yes, trying to be on the forefront of that.
Yes, yeah.
And so, another part you talked about, transportation. How does the district make the decision on when to replace buses and why now?
Sure. So when we say now, I want to clarify that this bond proposal is over the next 5 to 6 years. We'll be paying it off. So this means projecting out our current bus fleet 5 to 6 years. And if you own a vehicle or a car, projecting it out 5 to 6 years, you have to do some planning for replacement of your own vehicles. Currently, and I'll pull this up, our bus fleet. I have it in my notes here somewhere.
It said, I think it was, you have 16 now?
Yeah.
Trying to go to 18 and then replace.
I was going to find the
add
ages.
2 and replace 2 or something?
So we have, here it is. So of our bus fleet, right now, 6 of our buses are 10 years old.
Okay.
And 4 of our buses are 9 years old. And so just replacing those, if we don't replace them now, in 5 years from now, they'll be 15 years old and 14 years old. Most cars on the road are not on the road after that amount of time. So it also becomes a safety issue at some point. We want our students, and a maintenance issue. So you're going to be putting money into buses that are on the backside of their usefulness and their safety. So the Okemos Transportation Department and our fleet mechanics, we have had glowing records when we get them inspected by the state police. It's really a point of pride for us. Todd Sharp and his mechanics and his transportation department do a wonderful job of keeping really top class transportation system for our students. So we're looking at buses that are, replacing buses that are already 9 and 10 years old and already over 100,000 miles.
Okay.
And with the salt and wear and tear on the buses, again, it will, if the bond passes, it would alleviate us taking those expenses for buses out of our general fund, which is, again, mostly staffing, and only leaves that 15% for buying other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said if it passes, so
Yeah.
I'll ask you, what happens if this doesn't pass? Are all of these projects going to be unfunded, or just certain things move to the highest priority?
Yeah, so great question and fair question. And being in charge of making sure the district has plans for next year, we have done some contingency planning. So if it doesn't pass, the district would have to lease some buses next year. So there would be a financial impact between $13,000 and $26,000 there. Not to buy those buses, but to lease them. We have issues with our high school devices, technology devices, as I've told you, where the students are using those to access Google Classroom, online textbooks, type responses to papers. We're at a critical point where we're searching eBay for the parts because the devices are so outdated, we can't systematically find replacements.
Yeah.
So those are going to need to be replaced. So we have a couple of ideas. One idea, if it doesn't pass, is to replace the 5.6 devices. So 5.6 and 9.12 have the same device. 5.6 is a year newer. But we could then shift the 5.6 devices to the high school and kind of part them out to get the high school through another year and replace the 5.6 devices because that's a smaller number of devices, less money out of the general fund.
Okay.
If that's not enough, then we may have to go to the 7.8 devices and replace those. And that could range from, when we only have to replace the 5.6 devices, from anywhere between $500,000 to $700,000, and an additional about $700,000 to replace the 7.8 devices. So if the bond doesn't pass, the hit on that general fund is going to be between $500,000 and $1.7 million just to fund those needs. We have a phone system, our district phone system. If parents want to call us or we want to call each other, our phone system is end of life, can't even be supported by the company anymore. So if that breaks down, we have no choice but to buy a new phone system, and that's $150,000. So we'll gamble to see maybe if we can get through the year, but we don't want to be without a phone system in the schools. So if that goes bad in the year, we'd have to spend that $150,000. So that would be included in the $1.6 million. But then other things like the air conditioning, flexible learning environments, the expansion to Bennett Woods would be canceled.
Okay.
We would try to prioritize some of the other needs through our building and site sinking fund. And that's that other fund that generates, that I told you about earlier, that can generate some cash for us every year, about $1 to $1.2 million of cash. But we already have things slotted for the building and site sinking fund and replacing roofs and carpets and boilers and upgrading like the high school's tennis courts, things like that are already slated. So we're going to have to push some of them off to the sinking fund and then reprioritize and then let some of those go because we just can't possibly do those. It also means, as I said, with the Bennett Wood expansion being canceled, we have capacity issues in our elementary that are not solved. So then the district could be forced to look at buying portables.
Okay.
So and putting those in a school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that actually filled our time slot for this evening.
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah, it did. Thanks a lot for
Yeah.
joining us. That was a lot of information. I'm Killeen, and thank you for watching this special election interview on Home TV regarding the Okemos Public School Bonding Proposal before voters on May 7th. Thanks again to Superintendent John Hood for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good one.